Are you aware of the fact that searching for the thrill one Trevor travels to a location where he loses everything, including his life? Curiosity killed the caver. Neil Moss, an experienced adventurous person and a curious caver, who lost his life in a mysterious cave. But this story is not only the one about an endeavor where everything went wrong, but the one showing that even in the most mundane environments, there may be lurking very real threats. What could have forced Moss to get into the danger of this lower part of this risky cave? What happened to his adventure to become haunting? Read on to learn the details as we retell the horrifying story of Neil Moss and the cave that damned him. Located in the splendid country of Derbyshire Peak District, Peak Cavern, that is also referred to as the Great Cave, has attracted numerous explorers with a complex system of corridors and rooms. And still, for those with a passion for adventure, the cave's appeal is quite obvious. It is not surprising thus to note that Neil Moss, an ambitious undergraduate from Oxford University, was not left out. Having been a member of the British Speleological Association and especially interested in caving, Moss could hardly resist the call deep into the uncertain reaches of the Peak Cavern. The first attempt of exploring the cave was on 22/03/1959, when Moss led 7 other explorers to what they thought was the deepest they could penetrate into the heart of the cave. Their mission: to explore a new emergency 1,000 feet down a recently located shaft within a neighbor to the cave. The feeling was of excitement, high in preparation for the caving exercise with ropes, lamps, helmets, and other essentials for caving. Lots of giggles and talks were observed while moving through the narrow and winding tunnels in search of the exit. The team was able to get to the chamber which they had heard so much about, and to their amazement, the entire chamber was covered with glittering calcite formations. As it can be seen, after the brief description of the mine's interior, the author returned to the spotlight on the shaft that impressed Moss. When the first estimate of the depth was 40 feet, Moss hesitated and then decided to meet this challenge. And with a 75-foot ladder, Moss did not want to become a part of history by being just another person beyond this new discovered point. As Moss began his descent around 3:30 p.m., he encountered his first obstacle, a corkscrew twist midway down the shaft. Navigating this tricky section, he managed to push through a horizontal passage, only to face a new vertical tunnel 18 feet deep. Undeterred, he dropped into the tunnel, but was soon met with an unexpected barrier, a boulder obstructing his path. Moss attempted to move the boulder, but in the process the ladder became stuck beneath him. His efforts to dislodge the ladder proved futile, and frustration mounted as he realized the gravity of his predicament. The real challenge began when Moss tried to ascend. The ladder's immobility meant he was confined to a narrow space, making it nearly impossible to move. Despite his best efforts to maneuver, Moss became trapped in an 18-inch wide gap between the ladder and the cave wall. With each breath, the air around him became more suffocating as it was obstructed by his body. Moss knew that immediate action was required to avoid running out of oxygen. In a desperate bid for rescue, Moss shouted to his companions, informing them that he was stuck. His initial calls for help went unheard, but as panic set in, he repeated his distress signals. The team responded by attempting to lift the ladder, but their efforts were in vain as the ladder remained lodged. A rope was then thrown down for Moss to hold on to, but despite his attempts to secure himself, the rope snapped repeatedly under the strain. As the minutes ticked by, the situation grew increasingly dire. The confined space and lack of fresh air contributed to Moss's disorientation and growing sense of despair. Soon, the rescue mission quickly escalated to an important crisis when the world came to know of Moss's condition. Thus, his friends, understanding the severity of the case, dialed the numbers of the emergencies at once, which led to a massive call. In several hours, an intersectoral plan was activated, including several agencies and other structures. The Royal Air Force and Royal Navy successfully sent down specialized teams, and the National Caving Association sent down professional cavers who were most equipped to handle the conditions of this cave found in Peak Cavern. The local police were helpful in crowd control and protection, and multiple caving groups wanted to help with the rescue. That was the basis for many problems during the first attempts to rescue the company. Slender and strong volunteers and rescuers climbed into the dangerous shaft in an attempt to get to Moss. Ron Peters, one of the rescue team members, was able to get to Moss and anchored a rope on his chest. But when Moss tried to pull the rope, this only made his breathing problem even worse. Lack of oxygen was becoming critical and Moss's condition was declining. The rescue team was able to get oxygen tanks by around 12:30 a.m. I managed to get some relief and thus brought more volunteers to the scene and attempted the rescue. Still, the poisonous atmosphere in the shaft did not allow them to proceed with the work. Despite all the attempts, Moss was still locked up. Among the volunteers was 18-year-old June Bailey, a spirited and determined young woman from Manchester. Despite her youth and inexperience, Bailey's small and agile frame made her a promising candidate for the rescue mission. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, she eagerly volunteered to assist. With unwavering resolve, Bailey descended into the perilous shaft, navigating the hazardous terrain with impressive skill. She managed to reach Moss, providing a glimmer of hope to the exhausted rescue teams. However, the toxic conditions within the shaft quickly overpowered her. The air was thick with carbon dioxide and other harmful gases, making it difficult to breathe and stay focused. Bailey's time in the shaft was cut short as the noxious atmosphere forced her to retreat before she could make any meaningful progress in aiding Moss. They used compressed air cylinders trying to purge the polluted air. Thus, they tried to make conditions safer for the rescuers and Moss. Furthermore, they ensured that the surfaces of the shaft were coated with mud throughout, to help lessen friction and so that the rescue could be made that much easier. Despite such efforts, much improvement was not experienced since the situation was aggravated due to the poor air quality around the affected area, and rescue operations were becoming more and more complicated. Things worsened when heavy rains made the cave to be flooded where the rescue team had to pull out. They left the area only to return when the rain was gone and only to find that Moss was no longer breathing. An RAF doctor pronounced Moss dead at about 3:00 a.m. 24th of March. The crew which rescues Moss's body had to make a decision to attempt or not to attempt to pick it up after they already got the body out of water. In order to save his son's life, even at the cost of losing it, Eric Moss insisted on having the shaft be his son's tomb. This was closed with loose rocks from within, thus burying Neil Moss's dead body. He was posthumously awarded by nomenclature of the chamber, which was thereafter referred to as the Moss Chamber, and his story was told in books, documentaries, films, and other mediums. Neil Moss's story is still one of the most harrowing examples of the dangers that explorers go through and the challenges that are characteristic for cave exploration in particular. His legacy, however, remains, and cavers to this day visit the Moss Chamber and pay their respect to Thirlmere's lost caver. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe and drop a comment.